What is up to all our sidekicks and henchmen out there in the Geek Nation? My name is Noel. I'm not Johnny Destructo. Was not here today. However, he is your normal host, and he, as the owner of Johnny Destructo's Hero Complex in Manayunk, Philadelphia. With me this week is Len the Bat Tribble, who wants to thank Deke Animation Studios for getting him through the holiday weekend with old Inspector Gadget cartoons. Len, take it away.
I was watching Inspector Gadget, and I loved it. Sure, all the episodes were basically the same. Started the same, ended the same. But I didn't care. I was enjoying it and having a good time. So, thank you, Deke.
Were you talking about the theme song? The opening theme song was the same, and the closing credits were the same.
I think the plot was the same every
So
single
if only it was just the theme song.
Also with me today is Brian Lieb, who also wants to thank a different Deke of Deke's Barbecue here in Manayunk, Pennsylvania. Manayunk, PA.
Yeah.
It's a town, not a city. Either way. Who, for their spectacular customer service, Brian, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah. So, I waited longer than I should have to arrange some Thanksgiving dinner cooked by somebody other than myself. And all the meals were for like a lot of people. They're very expensive, right? But I had seen a sign at Deke's Barbecue. It said Thanksgiving dinner. I went in. I was like, I would like a couple of those. She was like, oh, we'll see if we can accommodate you. And then told her assistant, take that sign down. Because it was like 2 days before Thanksgiving. But they could accommodate me. They even, they gave me so much food. They gave me a little deal on the price because of some, little price jazz because of little miscommunication, and they were very cool about it. And I think we got so many meals out of it for 2 servings. So highly recommend it. Excellent experience at Deke's Barbecue.
Yeah, for anybody in the greater Philadelphia area that listens to the show and or watches us on YouTube, located at youtube.com/CultPopGo. Deke's is phenomenal. It is one of my favorite places. I am the only person in this household that likes barbecue, so it's like a special treat when it's just like you got your own dinner, right? Because I'm gonna order Deke's and eat in the corner like a little dirt bag. It's the best.
How doesn't she like barbecue?
Yeah, there's so many different types of barbecue.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know, and maybe it's a topic we'll explore someday, but.
Sure.
As of right now, it's just me alone eating ribs.
That's fair.
In the corner, in the aforementioned corner alone. And
your rib corner.
I'm okay with it because they're delicious.
Cool.
They're so happy. It's just me and my ribs. I don't want to talk to anybody during it.
Well, I'll tell you, this turkey had it was like regular Thanksgiving, all the sides and everything. So it was all great. The turkey even had like just a little bit of barbecue flavor. Oh. It was phenomenal.
Have you had their mac and cheese?
I have never been there before. I've driven past it on the way to Johnny Destructo's Hero Complex in Manayunk, Pennsylvania, many times, but I never stopped.
Welcome to Rib Talk.
Yes.
Baby back or spare? What do you guys think?
Well, you know what? Real quick, just to stay on the Deke's train.
I'll be on that Deke's train.
I've been to the restaurant. The food is delicious, but I have to say, the first time that I had Deke's was in the Manayunk area of Philadelphia, because I refuse to call it just a town. It's part of Philadelphia. Yeah. They had a food truck like day or something, and Deke's has a food truck that was there, and I got there. It was like an Italian sausage. So it was a barbecued Italian sausage with their French fries. I don't know, something about the barbecue grease that they made their fries in or something. I don't know. But those were some of the best fries. And plus, I love myself a good Italian sausage I've ever had. I enjoyed it so much that I remember eating it, walking to JD's as I was eating it, turning back around before I got to JD's and buying another one because I had eaten it all by the time I got to the door. I was like, yo, I have to have this again. It was so effing good, man.
Nice.
I promise we will talk about comics.
JD says he would not like to thank me for not bringing any Deke's Barbecue. So noted. I will not respond in any way. But I can't, I would type something out in the comments here to you, JD, but for some reason I can't. There's no ability for me to do that.
Yeah, you don't have the power, so
Yeah.
we're just gonna pretend to have it.
Cool.
Anyway, so we're gonna have a little bit of a different structured show today. We're gonna talk about just a few books, a couple of Thunder Rounds. We're gonna get into our book club review, 7 to Eternity by Rick Remender and Jerome Opeña. But we're also gonna do like a quick, truncated, fun time gutter talk today. You know, because we're down one man, so we figured we would just do the comics real quick because of holiday weekend, and then have an old school gutter talk conversation. So before we get into all of that, though, we do have
Letters?
a letter. We have letters.
We've got a letter.
We've got letters.
A
letter.
Singular letter.
One letter that was already mentioned in the comments, I believe. So
which letter is it?
To be fair, this one letter has lots and lots and lots and lots of letters in it.
Ooh.
It's got 2 letters in it. So every time that St. Saucy actually says, "Did you get my email?" I don't know if it's ever the right email because he often sends more than one. So we're gonna go with this one. So I'm all for small businesses. My shop I go to is a private owner, not a corporate chain, even though he started out as one. Basically, he took over the store and had to keep the name till the lease ended. But Saturday, I drove an hour one way to a shop I had visited twice as I was just getting into comics. Might have been once. In my mind, I had built up the place to be a comic book mecca. All other stores should travel there on a yearly basis and pay homage to its greatness. But woof. Either it had fallen into despair or it never really was that great to begin with. Narrow aisles, no organization, shelving fixtures standing on ends in the middle of the store. It was just a disappointment, as was another store in the area that I had never been to before but had heard great things about. Have any of you ever experienced anything like this? Now, there's 2 questions in here, so I'll let that one sit. Think about it for a second. I'll read the second half. This is explicitly for Len. Len, I know you stick mostly to trades, but I want to say you miss out on the extremely satisfying sensation of letting issues build up, but then tapping them closed and filling away in the various short boxes, filing them away in the various short boxes. Even just assembling your own bags and boards is just a simple, relaxing task. Do you miss that, Len?
No. Because when I was collecting comic books, when I started collecting comic books as a young buck, there weren't really any bags and boards. Or if they were, they weren't introduced to me because my family, my parents didn't introduce me to comic collecting. I just fell into comic collecting. And the guys around my way, we would buy comic books and we would just stack them wherever we did. I remember one day my mom coming into my room, as mothers do. This is parent talk for all you young kids. This is what your parents will do. They will come into your room and say, "You know what? It was time to redo your room and, change around the furniture, or they want to paint your room." No, that's just their excuse so they can get into your room to see what's going on, what you've been up to. So my mom, or one of her, she did this about twice a year, excursions into painting my room, came into my room upset to realize that I had taken all of the clothes that were supposed to be nicely folded into my dresser drawer and had, in my estimation, kept them just as nicely folded underneath my bed to make a place for me to stack my comic books. I thought my comic books look better in the drawer than my clothes. So much to say, I never got into the habit of bagging and boarding. I never dug that. That was never pleasurable for me. What actually is more pleasurable for me is actually having shelves where I can see my comics, where I can see the spines of my comics. And that's what actually drew me into making the shift over to trades, because I don't like the idea of them being boxed. I don't like the idea of me having to go lift up a box and then pulling out issues and all of that. Mm-hmm. I like having them nicely decorated on shelves and being proud of, showing off that I am a comic book collector, not having them in boxes that have been stored away for people to either not ever see or possibly trip over.
Yeah, I'm in a weird place in my reading habits. So I genuinely love reading in issues, but to your point too, I don't love having boxes of things everywhere. I'd prefer to have spines. So I'm trying to shift my reading habits to only getting the issues of things that I know need support. So indie comics and creator owned stuff. And then, the big two stuff that I could wait for trade, or omnibus, I might just start doing that. But it's a slow progress. And when it comes to bagging and boarding, I don't find that pleasurable. I do it for the stuff that I know that I'll either resell or want to keep for long periods of time. But other stuff just kind of stays in this, as you can see on the top over here, it just kind of stays in stacks until I spend a day going through all of them. It's not like I get it. I get the almost OCD like pleasure of putting things in their place. It's just my itch isn't scratched with long boxes and backs and boards.
Now, Noel, do you find are you at a point where you no longer want the kind of that ongoing experience from the big two?
Oh, that's my struggle. I prefer reading them like that, especially hero comics. So a lot of
to keep up with what I
think some of the pleasure of comic books is the immediacy of them. It's monthly, if not weekly or bi-weekly kind of sequential storytelling. It's pulp. Yeah. So superhero comics, absolutely, I prefer to read them in issues because you get that kind of like it's
the ongoing story. Those are your windows into the world as it progresses.
If they're done right, they're supposed to be sequential chunks into a larger story that you play along with over time. If you just read it, if you just binge it, it's not the same experience. It's just like watching a television show versus watching binging a show on Netflix. Those shows on Netflix aren't constructed to be weekly serials. They're constructed to be like a 12-hour movie.
Like that you talk or think about in the middle of the story. Where is it going to go? That kind of thing.
Yeah, they're different experiences. So I do prefer single issues. It's just, we're talking about space and care more than anything else. Like as I get older, it's more about how do I want to use space, and that's with spines and books versus boxes and storage.
Well, I think the display thing is a really good point. Like I found myself thinking, I forget if it was during stuff that we were reading or whatever, so something I might not normally pick up, like, oh, I want to get the issues of this. And then I thought, but at the end of it, I'd rather have it sitting on my bookshelf. I keep looking at it. You can't see that, but I'm looking at it. And there's the fun of, I remember going through, so I never had them bagged and boarded, but they're all put in long boxes, or the bulk of my collection is in long boxes. And I remember it would happen very rarely, but on the occasions when you would have some reason to go through it. Now, mine are not alphabetized or organized in any way. So it would just kind of be this, like, you go through and I remember this one from the late 90s. This was going on in my life and I loved this story and, or whatever. And that's a fun experience. But you're right. They're kind of just like this monolith, this like white monolith of boxes that just look like a bunch of cardboard boxes, even though you've got some real cool stuff in there. It doesn't look that cool.
Over the last like two years or so, as I've been growing the collection behind me, of like repurposing stuff into spines or selling off and gaining, I get that same feeling now just going through the shelf though. So like every night I read something before I go to bed. It's usually like I'll be going through a tome of something or a reread, or even just stuff that I skipped in the past. I'll stand here in front of my shelves for like 10-15 minutes and just kind of have a moment of like, oh man, that would be cool. Or maybe this one. Like I'll have that same experience, but it's really just like perusing spines.
It's a good point. I mean, it happens with books or it's and whatever you read, whatever format you first read it in, that's what you attach the memories to. So
it's. I guess there's just no right answer. Now, do you guys have any kind of experience with a shop that seemed poor or
the only thing that even
memory?
I don't have that experience, luckily enough. But the only thing that comes close to is going back into a place where you were when you were a very young kid, and everything is very small. It happened to me with my elementary school is the thing that stands out. For some reason, I was there like well into my 20s, and I was like, oh, this is all so miniature. That's the only thing that I've got to compare to that.
I guess my comparison would be the difference is going from, any of the comic book shops here in Philadelphia, from JD's Hero Complex, which is definitely, because of its size is, especially its original size when it was almost just like, this box. And then going to someplace like Amalgam, which, was always like this big space because it lends itself to, you being there and staying there and kind of like, setting up shop there. That is, I think there's a space in between the two that comic book stores have grown into over the last few years. You contrast that, though, especially if you're a longtime comic book shopper in the Philadelphia area, by if you still take the trip down to 20th and Chestnut and go to the original Fat Jack's Comics Crypt, which is definitely built for that old school comic book collector. They've got the new stuff. They've got the weeklies, but they still got the long boxes.
At least 70% of their store is their back issue bins.
Exactly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't get there near as often as I used to because it's no longer like my main comic book store. But even when I have gone there, you don't see the guys back there in the back issues too much anymore. That's just an old school mentality. And that, while it's not a depressing store, at all. It definitely has an older feeling, and it doesn't feel as inviting because of that.
Yeah, are the windows blacked out?
No,
because I was at a comic book store once and I was like, I know why you're doing this, but it also kind of gives a strange vibe. Yeah,
I will tell you too. Every time that I try, and my wife is so amazing to let me do that. Not let me. She supports it. Every single time we travel, no matter where we're going, I will look and see if there's a comic shop in the area.
Yeah, same here. Yeah,
and just visit it. So, sometimes if I like it, I'll buy something. But seeing the different comic shops across the country is just wild. Some are very antiseptic, very sparse. It's like a pop-up more than it is like an actually lived-in shop. Some are to the gills, vaulted ceilings stuff.
Yep.
And some are little huts. It's really great kind of seeing, and you can probably tell a lot about the neighborhood or the town you're in based off of what kind of local retailer or local comic shop is there, because if it's really lived in, if it's really full, I'm sure there's readership there. If it looks like it was just kind of plopped in, it's probably just a handful of people with a pull list, and everything else that falls under goes on the shelf. Like but I would highly suggest everybody to do that though. Like it's not a betrayal of your comic shop to visit other comic shops. Just go check them out because everybody is a part of the same network.
No, I have family members. My stepmother and dad like to go to a synagogue whenever they go on vacation. They like to visit a local synagogue to see what's what. It reminds me of that.
They're kind of like my synagogues.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not blasphemous at all.
No, a place of teaching.
Oh, I think Randy just popped in there too. He agrees because I know that he tours a lot. Randy Green put on the chat. That's the best. One of the things the most I miss about touring is visiting comic shops. Yeah, you travel around the country, visit comic shops. It's so wonderful seeing them.
I always considered when I was a kid, I was like, it's not really a mall if it doesn't have a comic store. Like, what is like Podunk thing without a comic store?
No.
But could I respond to Randy's about the boxes? He says, I put stickers on my boxes. It gives them character, and it makes it easier to remember what's in them. So just a story from my past as a naive youth, a boy. I thought, you know what I'll do? I'll write on the front of this box the names of the comics that are in. I'll write action dash some other thing that started with an A. And what a mistake, what a fool I was. And I look at it now. I still got it. It still says action to whatever other comic. And that is not in any way. If there's a single Action Comics in there, it's only by mistake. And I was like, oh, what have I done?
Robert Monroe actually commented also. I do that too. Before we moved to our town 16 years ago and we're house shopping, I made a point of checking out local comic book shops everywhere we went. If you at least even kind of love the habit, because you'll go to some weird stuff. There's actually one here in Philadelphia. I forget what it's called, but it's the one that was featured in one of the M. Night Shyamalan movies. It's essentially just a warehouse. Ontario. It's on Ontario.
Ontario. Yeah.
It's like going through somebody's bins, and if you got allergies, don't go in there. If it's a hot day, leave it alone.
Yeah.
But if you've got the resolve, man, you could spend 3 hours in that place just going through their enormous racks and back issue bins and stuff. Like, you can find gems in a place like that. So like, I kind of like crazy places like that. You know, like well, I'm talking about, you don't even know where the register is. Like,
exactly.
Like, you don't even know exactly where to purchase something because everything is just all over.
Kind of wander around with your stack.
Yeah, like, is somebody work here?
Yeah.
I actually
the cash.
I actually decided. I still don't know where I'm going to put this though, because I have a spinner rack that actually I think I got from JD, and I used to have on that spinner rack all of my back issue magazines, but now I've got a nice place for them. So I was like, all right, so what I'm going to put on this spinner rack? It was gifted to the Black Tribbles, all of the first issues of the original Milestone run. So I was going to put them on there, and they're all nice and bag and boarded. But I decided that what I'm going to do is, maybe I guess I'd have to go to Fat Jack's, or maybe when comic book conventions start again, in earnest, in person, I want to start looking for select books from my youth and go and purchase them to like fill out my spinner rack. So my spinner rack is just going to be old comic books from that meant something to me when I was young.
Can we guess some things that you would put in there? I have a guess of some stuff that you would put in there.
Okay, all right, sure.
I got to guess.
I think that you would put maybe a couple random keys of Uncle Scrooge.
Oh, you know what? Here's the thing. I did collect Uncle Scrooge, but I mostly collected Uncle Scrooge in paperbacks. So I wouldn't have him because I didn't really have the comic books. And now I've got
this show.
I've got 3 huge Uncle Scrooge omnibus, so I probably wouldn't put Uncle Scrooge there. You got to guess, babe?
I got to guess. This is just what popped into my mind first. The first story arc with Ra's al Ghul in Batman.
Ah, that is a
JD's got a guess.
That is a very good one. JD is spot on.
That guess is Richie Rich, by the way.
I hate you, JD, because one of the things that gave me this idea is because I actually have about 3 old Richie Riches bagged and boarded, waiting for this idea to come to fruition. So yes, Richie Rich will be on there. The Ra's al Ghul is not going to be that original arc, but what it is going to be, there was a treasury edition of Ra's al Ghul's meeting with Batman that I never owned as a youth.
But you always wanted.
Well, I didn't because the cover scared me. But,
a real youth, like a baby youth.
Yeah, I was a baby youth.
The first memory was Robin staring at him.
It scared the hell out of me, man. It was Ra's al Ghul looking down, and Robin was dead, and Batman was crying. I was like, But I would buy that. I would buy that.
Oh, can I give you or anybody else who's thinking about doing this a bit of advice? I have a rack too. It's not a spinner rack. It's more like what a magazine would have gone on. And I don't know, 10 years ago or so, went so out of my way to try to find hard cases to put comics on, right? Because over time, you get the 2 little indents where those things are. And I did find some, but not as easy as I thought. And they weren't even, I was expecting kind of like a thing that would close around the book, like a snap close case. Couldn't find anything like that, but I did find something that's got you like slide it in and it's got Mylar on the front and back.
Yeah. You know what that makes me think about slabs though. What do you guys feel about those?
I don't want to not be able to get into them, but if I could buy the slabs and then like open and close them, I'd do that.
Oh, that defeats the purpose of.
I know. Yeah.
Sure. So I do own 2 that I just kind of acquired through like buy-sell trades. Yeah. And I've been like mildly thinking about doing it just to protect stuff that I want to invest, like some firsts and some keys.
I mean, for you especially, because you have a lot of stuff in omnibuses and trades and whatever. Yeah, like you can still read the story elsewhere.
Like one of the slabs that I have is the first appearance of Jessica Cruz.
Okay.
Which I like fingers crossed gets any kind of value when the HBO show comes out. But I have that stuff collected, so like it's not like the accessibility to the issue is not really a thing. It's more like having display of an important event. Right. But speaking of important events, do you guys want to actually talk about comics now?
The ones that came, like some that came out this week.
The ones that came out this week, not just our sick collecting habits that others approve of.
The ones that JD is off screen hollering at us to get to. Sure.
So the first thing that we're going to talk about today is The Other History of the DC Universe #1, written by John Ridley with layouts by Giuseppe Camicoli and finishes by Andrea Cucci. Diamond has this to say. Actually, it's not Diamond anymore. Solicits have this to say. Academy Award-winning screenwriter John Ridley examines the mythology of the DC Universe in this compelling new miniseries that reframes iconic moments of the DC history and charts a previously unexplored socio-political thread as seen through the prism of DC superheroes who come from traditionally disenfranchised groups. I read this early, like 2 days early, because JD was able to get. We read it early. I appreciated having the extra time to get through this book because it's not really in the solicits. It is written in a prose style. So this very much is like a history book that we've seen in comics before. The history of the DC universe, the history of the Marvel universe. They're essentially prose pieces throughout art layouts. So the title should have told me that. I should have known that, but then when I opened it, I was just like, "Oh, this is just like reading a book with art." But
I didn't make that connection until you just said that. Now the history of the DC universe, I didn't put that together. Yeah,
it's a history of book that they've got a plethora of these over the course of the big 2 and just like comic books in general. So as soon as that kind of clicked, it was a much better reading experience for me. But I got to tell you, it was a little bit of a shock, and I put it down a couple times. This is not a binge through read. This is like a cut of like 5 or 6 issues to a certain point in the character's life, and then I was like, I'm gonna walk away for a second. Like I appreciated the extra time to read this issue this week because it was a heavy read, it was a dense read, but those aren't inherently bad things.
No,
I'm just glad I had more time to read it, and with that, I loved it.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it too. I'm gonna get my one small gripe out of the way, and this is a gripe that maybe I don't have if I have the physical copy, which I definitely will be getting once it's all collected in a trade. But my one small gripe is that the lettering in the book I felt was a little small. Now, and reading it on a digital, and that might just be if I could, because I'm reading it digitally, and it's, therefore it's looking a little smaller.
It's also even more than it normally would be because the aspect ratio of the book is more square, so it comes out smaller. Yeah,
Prestige plus.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
It's not a digital read. Yeah.
Right. It doesn't lend itself really to being read digitally. So that's my one gripe, and I'm going to be 100% honest that it is a very small gripe about this book, because in every other shape and form, this book was fantastic. I enjoyed it. I, unlike Noel, had an idea of what I was in for when I heard the title, and I appreciated it because as much as you may want to gripe with the whole other aspect of it, the history of DC Universe, because this is, what do you mean other? This is still, the history of the DC Universe. I'm not going to go down that well. I'm not going to take that bait. I'm just going to enjoy it for what it is, and for what it was just an amazing story of a hero who I honestly didn't give that much regard to. Outside of the way that the character was stolen by Hanna-Barbera for Super Friends. I really didn't give two F's about Black Lightning. I thought it was kind of cool. I thought it was kind of cool to be out there. It was only in learning more about his history, learning more about the history of the creators of the character, and then seeing other people with a more enlightened view do things with the character that he even began to resonate for me. But reading this history of the character of Black Lightning and knowing how tightly this history coincides with the actual origin of Black Lightning just tells me, it gives me a whole new regard for him, because Black Lightning is Batman. That is what he is. That is what he is. And he is Batman in the truest sense, because he is a man who made the most of himself because he wanted to be the most of himself, not just because he was trying to avenge what happened to him. And I thought that was just one of several fascinating and amazing aspects to come out of this read. It's a great book.
There's a really good underlying through line for this whole issue, or his whole story, because I think that this series is supposed to be an anthology. Like the next issue, I don't think it's going to be about Jefferson Pierce.
Right.
But there is a really interesting conversation about the perception of Black excellence in this book. Not only the expectations he puts on himself from jump, wanting to like beat scores of Olympians, wanting to push and push and push and be the best that ever was, and the damage that gives him, or the damage that sows in his personal life. But then also just the idea of, even when you're in this kind of process of needing to be the best ever by virtue of just your appearance, you other even your allies.
Exactly.
Like his impression of Vixen and his impression of Jon Stewart in those years, while he was like in the thick of trying to just deal with himself, is so fascinating. Like it's like Jon Stewart's an arrogant prick. Yeah. And this person's like this, and she's stupid for doing that. And hell no, I won't join your Justice League bullshit. Like, it was really fascinating, because in a lot of with a less talented writer, I think that it would come off as almost unlikable. But it's so well done, and it's so well kind of layered, that he's never unlikable, even though he does unlikable things. Like narratively, things that you're supposed to like appreciate about a hero, he does the opposite in a lot of ways, because you get to hear his inner thoughts about, because he's the prose of this book is it's all first person perspective, past tense,
right?
So he's telling it at some other time, so you're getting his omniscient thoughts of what's going on in the moment, and they're not all great.
No, they're not. No, they're not.
Which is it's just such a wonderful, fascinating read too, because again, under other less careful hands, it would come off as, well, this guy sounds like a prick.
But I also appreciated that his inner monologue sounded truly like inner monologue. Sometimes inner monologue comes off still sounding like, like John Steinbeck wrote it. You know what I mean? This actually still sounds like Jefferson Pierce giving you a window into his real thoughts, his real feelings, his real emotions, his real perceptions, his real fascinations on things. I actually appreciated his read on Jon Stewart, because I think that it's a read that as a Black man, you definitely could have of Jon Stewart. Actually, to be fair, it was a read that I had of Jon Stewart for a long time.
Which aspects of that, Len? The substitute hero part, or his like general character?
The substitute hero part of it, and also, and this is no fault of the characters, it's fault of the company in which the character was created, their disregard for that character's point of view about being the substitute. You know what I mean? There's a reason why Jon Stewart doesn't really show up the rest of the time. There's a reason why, even though Jon Stewart was still very much there, the substitute Green Lantern, they still went and found Guy Gardner. They still went and found Kyle Kyle Radner or whatever the hell his name was. You know what I mean?
JD's stewing right now. Like
there's a disregard for his point of view. Yeah. There's a disregard for his point of view and for his actual being that is that Jefferson Pierce's initial reaction to Jon Stewart speaks to, and I appreciated that. I liked and I thought that was a very nuanced approach to have, and especially because later on, he reconciles himself with it as well. I just thought this was a very smart book, and it is the other side of the history. There are historical moments that happened in this book that actually did take place in the comics, but you never, for one reason or another, were allowed to see the character's inner thoughts, his perspective on it. And now you are, and I think it's very enlightening, and it is so well done. And we haven't even touched on the art. This book is beautiful. This is a fucking gorgeous ass book.
So JD actually, he's throwing in some stuff here. Like he wished that, where is it? Giuseppe Camicoli didn't actually do the art. He did the layouts, and someone else came in and did finishes. And he wishes that it would have been Giuseppe Camicoli the whole time. I kind of figured that would be the case because Camicoli is on a monthly already, and I don't know what their lead-in was for this book. There's no way that he would have been able to do something this intense at the same time as keeping up with a monthly schedule. Mm-hmm. He's the sole artist for Undiscovered Country.
Okay.
Which is an intensely drawn book.
It is an intensely drawn book, and it has never been late. Like for a creator-owned book, it's always there. So I kind of figured that would be the case, and then I saw it. But I loved the art as well. I loved the layouts, which is him. But he also mentioned something interesting here about he thought it was strange that it wasn't a modern take. But personally, I think that you needed it to not be a modern take because he had to lay this origin across the idea of all of these historical events.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it kind of parallels these historical events, DC historical events took place over the course of Black Lightning's actual real world.
Exactly.
Like character development and these are, there's a meta element to this story that if you use stuff from the New 52 or Rebirth or whatever, wouldn't really layer on. Like they weren't treating the character in that way at that time, that kind of thing. And so I had kind of, I was forewarned by Noel. He sent out in the chat. He was like, "Hey guys, leave yourself enough time for the other history of the DC universe." And I sort of did, but I read it. I forget, Wednesday or Thursday, whenever it was. I started it, and I was like, "Whoa, this is like a prose thing." Let me, I just want to breeze through something else real quick because for whatever reason, novels are novels, and when they do a lot of prose in comics, sometimes it can bog me down. But then I picked it up last night, already with that kind of all right, this is gonna be lengthy to get through, and I was just flowing through it. It was once I kind of just got into that style that it is in fact more of an illustrated book, basically. It was so well told that I didn't find myself held up at all. And I like the getting to see this against the actual history of the DC universe, not the in continuity history, but the real way that these stories played out. Like the using Jon Stewart having destroyed. Well, he didn't really destroy it. I always felt he got a little bit of a bad rap on that one, but he just like didn't save it. But that also happened well before I was reading comics, so I would only read like about Jon Stewart's struggles with having done, like that kind of thing.
Right, destroyed a planet destroyed on his watch.
On his watch,
during the miniseries Cosmic Odyssey.
Yeah, which was now I'm trying to it started with an X. What was that? What was the name of that planet?
Don't ask me. It's gone.
Randy, what was the name of that planet? But I thought that was great. I thought, you don't hear about that a lot anymore, but I thought it really worked in the context of this story to be one of the turning points in Jefferson Pierce's view of Jon Stewart. That like seeing it humanized him in Pierce's view. Speaking of the layouts, I really like what they have done. This is a common thing in comics, but the way that they have presented the first appearances of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, it's very common to show the covers of their first appearances as kind of their in-universe early appearances. And they did that here, but they did it in a really cool way where you don't see much of it. You just see like kind of a sliver of Batman. But if you know what Detective 27 looks like, you're like, oh, that's the cover of Detective 27. And same with Wonder Woman. And with the Justice League also, I think I believe all of the different, or at least Flash and Green Lantern are in their sort of poses. Xanshi, thank you. That is the planet. In case anybody doesn't recognize that word that I just screamed out, that is the planet that Jon Stewart was unable to say.
Yeah, that's a neural condition. I just yell Xanshi. Yeah.
Anyway,
this was an amazing. I'm glad I had this book this week. Right, like it was a quieter week because of the holiday. Wasn't really doing family things, and just having this kind of issue to pour over the course of like 2 days, as opposed to, in between a bunch of other superhero comics. This was a good
great. Like event, like a special kind of, that you often get around the holidays.
And I'm very much looking forward to whatever the next characters. So throughout the course of a bunch of this issue, he does interact with a handful of other characters of color in the DC universe. If I don't know where this is going, but I know it's an anthology series. I would absolutely adore it if we get to see the other perspectives of those same events with some of these characters. Like, is there going to be a Jon Stewart issue? Where you're seeing his perspective? Is there going to be a Vixen issue? I think I had read somewhere that there's going to be a Renee Montoya issue who wasn't born during this, so that'll probably be just like later on. But still, like this is great. I would highly recommend this.
The fact that they give the years, I think it implies that it will be.
Are they going to deal with Crisis in this?
Well, I think that. I don't know if they're going to deal with Crisis. I mean, because technically Crisis happened in the midst of this book, because Crisis technically took place in 1985. I mean, I don't know where they say what year it took place in the in the DC universe, but it technically took place in 1985. And this book starts that it's from 1972 to 1995. So
it's kind of a pre-crisis history too. You've got like a lot of homages to the first appearance of the Justice League, but also you could get around it. But the way that they talk about the introduction of Superman and that kind of thing, it really sounds like there weren't superheroes before this, which would be, Earth 1.
Well, they definitely. And just to your point, B, about how he showed the first appearances of Supes, who is full screen, even though you get the slither of Wonder Woman and Batman. He also does an homage to the classic Neil Adams cover with the first appearance of Jon Stewart, because that is full blown. It's almost like a recreation of that scene that happens.
It even looks similar in the art style. Looks like it's
I mean, it could maybe even be like a copy, like a trace of it. It's so spot on. But what I what I really liked was some of the social commentary, like how he was an Olympic, athlete, gold medal athlete at the Olympics, where there was drama, where there were the I just had it because it's the one 1972, I believe, where boom, there we go. Yeah,
we're Munich.
Munich, and you had the Israeli athletes who were killed. And even though this is it's comic book history, you know what I'm saying? But there were some black athletes who were the champions to come out of that Olympics, but all you know of those Olympics are what happened to the Israelis and what happened in Mark Spitz, and his truism is true. They return to America and they're still trying to find themselves. There's so much about this book. It's so good.
That's such a good point, and that's something that wasn't lost on me when I was reading it too. The idea that he strove most of his life at that point to make a certain record, beat it, but still is considered like fifth page news because of everything else happening, and all it did was fuel his internal anger more.
Exactly.
There's even a suggestion. Now, I don't know what his powers origin is. I don't know if it's like it is in the show or not. But there's kind of a suggestion. Hey, JD.
I knew eventually he. I don't know why he was fronting like he didn't. He wasn't going to.
I was going to like.
But the suggestion that it was kind of like his own internal push gave him his powers. Which I think is an interesting idea.
Great idea.
Yeah. The thing with the costumes, there was a couple of costume moments that I thought were cool, where the kid showing up on Halloween and he's dressed as Black Lightning is really cool, and then at the end, the final scene of the book with the costume, I thought was a cool, just like a good note to go out on, and an interesting choice.
I think JD is subtly trying to tell us to move on to another book.
I'm just here with some breaking news. Hi, guys.
Hey.
So I, Noel mentioned earlier that I get the books about a week in advance. And so I got Batman Catwoman #1. Are you guys looking forward to this?
Yes.
I mean,
I am.
It was great.
Nice.
It was really
good.
good.
It
was really good.
Yeah, it's really solid Tom King. There are two versions of Tom King, I think. There's the version that did Batman and Heroes in Crisis, and I think that was due to a lot of editorial interference. And then there's the Mr. Miracle, Vision, Strange Adventures, and now Batman Catwoman Tom King, where I think he's able to do his work without being interfered with. So I just wanted to come on and say you guys should pick up Batman Catwoman #1 when it comes out this Wednesday. It's
Tuesday.
real good. Noel, did you read it?
I did read it, and I agree with you. It changes time periods a lot during the course of the book, and there's visual indications, but they're really subtle, and it does it in kind of an Aaron Sorkin kind of way where people finish sentences and continue them in a different time period. So it takes like maybe 5 or 6 issues to kind of like get into the flow of it, but as soon as you do, it's pretty dope. Like it's a good
5 or 6 issues.
How many?
5 or 6 pages. 17. I've read 17 of the 12 issues because they feel like that. Sorry, pages. Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, it's weird as hell. But I'm curious about all the things that it has set up. So I just want to come on and say you guys should definitely check it out. If you have given up on Tom King, maybe try issue #1 of Batman Catwoman. And I hope you guys have a good show.
Oh, thank you.
Bye.
It's way more engaging when I'm not on there. It's wonderful to listen to. You guys are doing great. Love you. Bye.
Bye. I love you.
So anyway, what